A study by Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India shows no evidence of discrimination against religious or social groups in providing basic amenities and welfare schemes. Titled A Secular Democracy in Practice, Objective Assessment of Amenities Programs in India, this study by EAC-PM member and economist Shamika Ravi has examined gains in electricity, bank accounts, mobiles, toilets, and cited that data to bust the perception of, quote, dwindling democracy in India as alleged by the opposition party. Now, let me just give you a brief idea of how this study has been conducted. So, this study has been conducted using the data from National Family Health Survey. So, it's actually self-reported data. It is not administrative data. The study covers the time period from 2015-16 to 2019-21. So, that's a period of 5 years. And it includes data from over 1.2 million households, and especially the poorest of the poor. Here are the highlights of the study. First up, no evidence of catering only to one community. There is no discrimination against minority groups in providing basic amenities. The conclusion this report makes is that India's democracy remains robust with no evidence of discrimination, but the government must continue to focus on uplifting the poorest 20% amongst us. Data says there is no evidence of government catering only to one community or religion from this period that I mentioned. There are some graphs as I am showing. In some cases, minority communities have gained more than the majority community, as this chart shows. In categories like toilets, bank, accounts, electricity, target achievement is higher in Muslim households than Hindu households from the 20% poorest households. Even in the category of phones, mobile phones, Christians and Muslims are ahead of Hindu households. I'm joined by the author of this report, Shamika Ravi. Shamika Ravi, thanks a lot for speaking to us. I want to first begin by understanding from you, why was this study done? Was there any particular need felt? Was this sanctioned for a particular reason? Why was this felt necessary?
No, nobody sanctions such studies. Basically, you see, there is something fundamentally flawed in the way the current rankings you are seeing in terms of the democracy, and you are seeing some studies come out and basically paint India as a country where democracy is weakening.
Right.
Now, you know, just ranking democracies and autocracies across the world, it's a very, it's a simple exercise, meaning do you have free and fair elections? Does everyone have vote? Do you have peaceful transition of power, and is there a separation of the power between different arms? But a given democracy, whether it is strengthening or weakening, is a far more complex exercise. And most of these, in fact, almost all these current rankings that exist is econometrically or statistically, these are jokes. These are very extremely flawed methodologies. They speak to a handful of experts. We don't know who these experts are, but even if we knew, statistically talking to such a small group of people on a perception-based uniform survey is not the right way to look at how a country like India, how is the democracy doing. So we're a very large country, 900 million electors, more than 100 languages. So you really have to look at data objectively, and that too representative data, Shiva. I think the point here is, we're not saying looking at government data. And that is, I think, the strength of this analysis and this paper, that we basically look at self-reported household data. So this is not administrative. These are households reporting. So if anything, this is an underestimate of what reality is. Okay. So when you look at 1.2 million households over 5 or 6 years of Modi administration, from the first year up until 1921,
right.
This is the National Family Health Survey. We started looking at the bottom 20% and seeing, the idea was, there's so much noise around discrimination and declining majority. The attempt was to carefully look at the data and say, is there any discernible bias? Is there any discrimination in the administration when it comes to providing basic amenities? So we study around 6 amenities, big schemes. Pertaining to whether it's financial inclusion, so Jan Dhan account, whether it is mobile telephony, electricity, water, LPG, etc. And we find absolutely none. We don't find any discrimination or bias across religious groups, across social groups, so SC, STs, etc., or across geographic clusters. Because the geographic cluster one is not as obvious. Religious groups, it's easy to look at them. Geographical clusters, I think the reason it's important to study is not all districts in India are homogeneous. We have districts that are Muslim majority, we have districts that are Sikh majority, districts which are Christian majority, so on and so forth. Now, it's important to understand that if an administration really does want to discriminate, it's quite easy to do that. Geographically, you can just limit the pipes, so you can limit the electricity supply. Geographically, it's easy to target and discriminate.
Right.
That's why we look at it, and we look at all districts across the country. We find absolutely no discrimination of any form.
Okay.
And if anything, there are some amenities where minorities are actually doing marginally better.
Yes, I did show that. There are, of course, certain categories where the minority households are doing better. But I want to understand from you, how would you respond to people who will say that, when they criticize the fact that there is, quote, dwindling democracy in India, they don't generally mean government schemes. That's not where they're targeting. When they talk about majoritarianism or sliding democracy, they're talking about measures outside of government schemes.
Oh, it does. We have to define what are the measures, number one. And this particular study provides you an objective measure of some things. Otherwise, nothing has been defined objectively. Perception-based, extremely scattered view. Most of it is anecdotal. When you speak to 10 people, 20 people, it's your opinion versus another 20 people.
Right.
That's why looking at large objective databases become very important. Now, another reason why we have to look at data, Shivani, is that, everybody has a vote. And remember the expectations of the bottom 20%, which is the focus of my analysis. These are the weakest and the most vulnerable segments of our society. Now, in a democracy, this paper is also telling you that in a democracy, a handful of experts or handful of elite, I think that's the right word, cannot subvert the expectations and the aspirations by which they have voted for a certain government. And what do you think they vote for governments for? What is the expectation that comes out of their voting mechanism? They are voting for the government to provide them with basic amenities and take them out of this daily drudgery of life, which means water, electricity, just basic amenities. And politics apart, you can see that administration is not discriminating in any form. And so we are, it reaffirms a core belief, which is India's democracy. The roots are quite deep and healthy, it's just a reaffirmation of that.
All right. Shamika Ravi, thanks a lot for joining us on your study. You're saying the roots of Indian democracy are quite sturdy. Thanks a lot for speaking to us. I also want to open this up to a couple of our guests joining us. Joining me is senior editor, News18.com, Aman Sharma. Rashid Kidwai, senior journalist, also stays with us. Let's go across to Rashid Kidwai first. Rashid Kidwai, you look here. Here's a study that is saying that, there's so much charges against the Narendra Modi government that they're anti-minority. You look at how the benefits of the government are going to the public, and minorities are even ahead of the majority community. So all of this politics that this government is anti-minority is based on nothing.
Shivani, we are a constitutional democracy. There is rule of law. Any government that takes oath of office, swears by, protecting every Indian citizen, that includes Hindus, that includes all caste and creed. Now, what you're talking about discrimination all is a political rhetoric or political in nature. We know that, look at the representation of, Muslims in parliament. It's dwindling. You look at the BJP, which is largely today with 303 members of parliament, it does not have a single Muslim representative. Now, it's a complex phenomena, but that is why I'm explaining, I'm not justifying why this kind of things happen, that, there's a discrimination and all that. So if you look at the number of MLAs, and from the BJP kitty and all, it's far less. So therefore, this rhetoric is there. But rule of law, constitutional democracy, as the study by Dr. Ravi was indicating, proves that point. It reinforces there is nobody is ashamed of Indian democracy. All of us are very proud of it and striving because there is rule of law.
Okay, but I think you may say so, but Aman, the reality is we are seeing increased attacks on quote-unquote Indian democracy we've been termed an elected autocracy by some perception indices. And I think Shamika was referring to the fact that this study is a response to those studies that are, again and again targeting Indian democracy by talking to a handful of experts, but not giving us any idea on what basis is Indian democracy sliding. Do you think this is going to be a key study for the government?
Exactly. See, I think the study makes a very important point that all people in the country, irrespective of caste, creed or religion, are getting government benefits and various amenities. This is a sign of robust democracy, a sign of strengthening democracy. I would take you back to what the Prime Minister said earlier this month at the BJP's Foundation Day, when he said that there are many champions of social justice in the country and parties which claim they are champions, but it is only the BJP which is actually the champion of social justice, because it has distributed all welfare schemes of the government without any bias. And the PM has been, this study also mentioned, the PM has been mentioning again and again about complete saturation of these schemes to reach the last mile, every person in the country. He said that from the ramparts of the Red Fort also on Independence Day earlier. Clearly it shows that the scheme, and in fact, Shivani, there have never been any complaints that somebody has been discriminated in the distribution of a scheme, be it the Har Ghar Jal Yojana, be it the PM Awas Yojana, be it the Swachh Bharat toilet scheme, or be it the free distribution of ration that the government has done for over 2 years during the COVID regime. Every religion, every person irrespective of caste and creed has got these benefits. And I think this study makes that important point, that if benefits are reaching every person in the country without any bias, this shows the sign of a strengthening democracy and not a dwindling democracy.
Yes, and interestingly, Shamika Ravi also mentioned that actually if you wanted to discriminate, it's very easy to do so, especially in terms of geography. There are Muslim-dominated areas, districts, and you could easily do it. But the fact that even in terms of geography, no distinction comes. In fact, Muslim households are gaining even more than Hindu households is a reflection. But, Aman, here's what I asked Shamika also. This is not government data. She answered that. This is self-reported data. So you can't say that this is just what government has put on its tables. But this is still schemes. What about the criticism outside of schemes?
Well, exactly. So, as Mr. Rashid Kadvi was saying, that the inadequate representation of Muslims in parliament, or be it in state assemblies, where the BJP is in power, that is a criticism which keeps on coming to the BJP. But the BJP always says that it's about winnability of the candidate. They go by the winnability of the candidate and not by the religion of the candidate. But of course, when it comes to, I think if we come back to what the schemes are all about, I think when we've traveled in elections, Shivani, to the ground, you do come across even minorities coming across and saying that yes, we have got a cylinder, yes, we have got a house, we have got drinking water, and nobody is discriminated against us in the village. Well, in the past, there have been cases where the upper castes used to, corner these benefits in the villages. At least in this government schemes, I don't see that happening, and it's a very, very equitable distribution.
That brings me to Rashid Kirwai. I have only 30 seconds left, sir. That's the fundamental reason why Modi continues to be popular. His fundamental moat is the beneficiary moat. And you see the erosion of the Muslim faith in some of the other parties, the more traditional Congress parties. Is it not because they're gaining more under Narendra Modi?
Yes, so Shivani, what your question is slightly, in the sense, it's complex, because here we are talking about the government benefits being passed on, and as Aman was saying, about the political dividends that a particular community or its political aspirants are receiving. And as I said, this is a complex thing. In any case, the India story is always half full or half empty.
Okay.
We can go campaigning how many people are benefiting, but there are also a lot of people being left around.
Okay.
Remember, this Justice Sachar Committee report was also a government, sponsored study, and that had shown that the minorities are lagging behind.
No, but what did the Congress do to that report? For that report and all of the time that it was in power is the question that will come to mind. But I've run out of time. Rashid Kirwai, Aman, thanks a lot for joining us. We'll try and take this forward when we can. Time for me to take your leave. My colleague Anusha is joining you with News Epicenter.